The one thing they are doing that's moving in that direction is probably not going to be enough from your perspective. The requirement for an information security plan is something every carrier, the carriers have to put these plans together, submit them to Team Telecom, review and approval. That's a dynamic process that goes in there. It's actually a fairly complicated series of measures, and there is protection for the physical infrastructure in an information security plan. It's not just the information, it's also, but if you were to look at one of those, I would almost guarantee you might say that doesn't go far enough, and again, Team Telecom doesn't have the ability to require anything. They simply work through these agreements, and also from the carrier perspective, if you're a submarine cable operator, margins are pretty thin. I mean, at least that's the general sense I get from working with them. And they can't afford to just, out of their own pocket, build lots of new protections. Somebody has to pay for that, and Team Telecom doesn't have a budget. The carriers don't have much of a budget for this either, so they do what they can, but there are limits.
So it's a good point. So I think probably more so than any of the stuff that you were talking about, Team Telecom with these documents, that probably Sarbanes-Oxley does more to change the behavior and therefore the underlying infrastructure. Because Sarbanes-Oxley, from what I understand, makes it a requirement of companies to have all their data secured and backed up, etc., which I know firsthand has caused basically every business in Manhattan to get the hell out of Manhattan and go to New Jersey and data centers. And I've watched like millions of feet of available space in New Jersey evaporate, and now they have been for a long time breaking ground and building new buildings to house more servers for the data. So when they do that, because of Sarbanes-Oxley, because they moved and then build a new building, because they have to have power and servers and it's got to be secure for the data purposes, then there's new fiber built. And every time they do that, they're building in redundancies. The problem is that's data center redundancy, like I was talking about at the beginning. That's nice, but it's not physical air, core interconnection, undersea cable landing, physical diversity. And to your point, they don't have the dough to do it, and no document could say, oh yeah, you guys that are all put on your money to be in here, well guess what? You all have to also be over here too. I mean, there are certainly examples, like in New York, there's 111 8th, there's 60 Hudson Street. You pretty much say those are the two big ones. And then there's 165 Halsey in Newark. These are all things that sort of natural outgrowths, evolution. But in some cities, there's one, and that's the problem. So there could be 2 or 3, and it's prudent for them to each have a POP in 1, 2, or 3. But then the other people they need to connect to aren't always in those other 3. Sometimes they're only in the 1. Mm-hmm. So where do you get the money to make somebody diverse? And again, you're right. Yeah, I don't see the government doing this. Maybe that's because they don't want me to see it. That could very well be. But if they're doing anything as it relates to this specifically, it's not working because I don't see any movement. So if they are working on it behind the scenes, it's either like way off in the future or they're not working on it. And that's the thing that freaks me out.
I would propose that there's plenty of networks that are quite robust. It's not come out of the internet. So if someone's really, like our government, there's plenty of stuff. So satellites are not being turned off.
Oh yeah.
Last I checked. Now, there's not enough room to come out of the internet over the satellites. But we face this every day in terms of, MSN doesn't make all that much money, and we want to be much more robustly interconnected. But at the end of the day, as you say, that commercial entities, the dollar rules, and the earthquake that hit in Asia, most of the circuits, once all that stuff was restored, are still unprotected circuits. There's still not enough. There still is the part about MPLS, or we can simplify this with one more layer of abstraction, and oh look, our butts are covered. Right. It all looks great if an individual node fails or some kind of a thing, but when you're talking about a catastrophe, I mean, one Wilshire's off or Palo Alto Internet Exchange is off. Mostly how we think it's unfortunate is that, well, the West Coast would be jacked up so badly if the Palo Alto Internet Exchange is off that you kind of get a get out of jail free card for a few hours or days. But if you actually look, if you go there to that building itself, it's an old school building, and someone could drive a semi right up next to it, and boom, that building is gone.
And not replaceable.
It'll take a year to actually get things put back into place.
So that's the Humpty Dumpty factor.
And I agree with you. I've worried about it for a long time, but who wants to be the guy to really say that? Now, back in the day, I guess, World War II vets were freaked out, and Belcore Standards and AT&T, they built things properly. I mean, they're, almost nuclear proof. And but who does that now? I mean, you raise no awareness. Is that going to get us the money, or really decides, or does Team Telecom go public and say, we need to build this properly now because it's such critical infrastructure? I don't know.
Well, the one entity that can actually require some of this to be built, not Team Telecom, is the FCC. Because if you want to build a new cable across the Atlantic, say, which I don't think anyone wants to do right now because there's so much excess capacity, the FCC has to grant that license. They could condition it upon using a diverse cable landing station or whatever they want to do. The FCC could do that. That's not a Team Telecom issue. That's an FCC issue. They won't. They haven't because they actually want to encourage people to build facilities, and the more conditions you impose on them, the less likely they are to want to do that. So they haven't done that in the past, but in theory, they have the authority to look into that issue.
And, you know, Doug, right on with your point, and I don't have a problem raising my hand and saying I don't mind being the guy telling everybody that the emperor has no clothes, because the emperor has no clothes. And the fact is,
People don't want to hear it, though.
I know they don't want to hear it, and that's why I keep talking about it, because, you know, oh, well, everything's fine. Like, I just don't like having conversations with people that say, well, it's the internet. It's fine. It's all fine. It's the internet. It's just a reroute. It's MPLS. It's MPLS, okay? It works. I'm like, oh my God. You know, I'm not trying to sell you colo space. I don't care. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to say that you've got to shed that notion that it's okay and that we're all in the land of make-believe here, and that it's cool. And, you know, when everybody's like, okay, and then they say what you said, all right, well, now how do we deal with this then? Because if the PACs ever went down, or one or more of the other critical points
I
went
agree
down.
with the earlier one. When some big thing goes down.
When it happens, what I don't want is everybody to be flat-footed at that moment. I want everybody to know, okay, this is what really happened. And, you know, then the shock of it, mentally, you could prepare to deal with, rather than not have a clue that you just got your bell rung completely, toast. And maybe it's okay for some countries in Southeast Asia to be off net for a month or two. We go off net for a couple days. The dollar, fiat currency, gone. All those interrelations, all the interbanks, faith, credit, trust, gone. Markets, tanked. Humpty Dumpty. You cannot put it back together again. So what are we, like, pretending that this isn't going to happen? Or if it's really that bad, no one wants to talk about it because we think, like, we're going to give the bad guys the idea that they should do this. I contend that they know already, and we should stop acting like we don't. They don't know that we know, so if we don't say it, then they won't figure it out. I mean, come on. That's not acceptable, and I hope, I pray that there's some shadow government thing going on. And I know Verizon built an amazing, absolutely amazing, layer 1, fully meshed, fully redundant global network, particularly in Asia, where there aren't any common interconnection points. None of the Asian nations really want to go to Mitsubishi Tower in Tokyo because they don't like the Japanese, and the Japanese don't like the Koreans, whatever. Layer 1, physical, Verizon went in and built the network. Every point's connected to every other point with fiber. I contend that their network would survive the loss of an entire major node. The problem is that civilization is hinged on all of the networks, not just theirs. And if the others went away, the endpoints, the people in the content, would somehow need to physically get reconnected to the surviving network, and that's the thing that would take up time. And maybe that's actually the solution, and maybe that's the plan that needs to be put in place. This is the disaster plan, and this is your closest Verizon node, and if you're still going but your provider's gone, you have to figure out how to get from here to that node. And that may be across the hall, across the room, across the street, across the state. I don't know. But maybe I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe that's, you know, the philosophy, because they're the only people that really have the money in the first place. Maybe a handful of carriers in the world have the money to build that type of network that could sustain a hit like that, and that has enough capacity to keep civilization going. Just a thought. I think we're out of time now. Thank you.